welcome to another edition of UpFront Takes. I'm your host, Daniel Marcello, and of course, we've got another bright personality as Joe DeBlasi has joined us, another Stony Brook Club baseball member, former roommate of mine at Stony Brook as well. DeBlasi, introduce yourself, and how are you doing as we head towards the Christmas time of the year?
Hey there, Dan. Thanks for having me on. Name's Joe DeBlasi. I've known Dan for 4 years now. We go back to our days at Stony Brook, and I'm doing pretty good myself. I just finished up my law school exams, just finished Wednesday, actually, and yeah, I finally have time to think about Christmas now. I got the tree up in the background, and I'm ready to start enjoying myself now.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So let's get right into it. 15 minutes on the clock. Our topics today, for those who are wondering, probably Mets, a lot Mets and Jets, the two things that have tortured us, but have given us a little bit of happiness over our years of watching sports. But let's get those 15 minutes. All right, I got it on my phone now. And the first question that we have for today is, yes, the Jets have sucked this year. They're winless, but let's look at the bright side here. What Jet has impressed you the most in this lackluster season?
Three names stand out to me. There's Mekhi Becton, obviously the first round pick. There was a loaded tackle draft this year. We didn't know if the Giants ended up getting Thomas. We were looking into him. The Browns got Willis, and Wirfs ended up going to the Bucks behind us. And was a little skeptical about Becton just because he's one of these guys that was a big combine standout. Had a very impressive 40, very impressive physical attributes, but was always considered very raw. I didn't know how that would translate from a relatively smaller school like Louisville, not like a big powerhouse college football school, to the AFC East. And, he has held up phenomenally well. He is, just tossing these career-long pass rushers to the side. And, as a Jets fan who is with some horrific offensive line play in, not only 20 years, but especially the last few years, it's great. I mean, he looks like a young DeBrickashaw Ferguson. It's amazing. Then Denzel Mims, the guy that we got in the later rounds, he looks like a very athletic, very lanky, long wide receiver. He can go up and get some balls, decent speed as well. And Quinnen Williams, he was obviously picked very high last year, number 3 in the draft, coming out of Alabama. And myself personally, I know a lot of Jets fans that I know didn't look very good last year. Looked a little undersized at time. Obviously, he's a very young guy, and but he has come out, absolutely worked his ass off during the offseason, and he looks great now, borderline Pro Bowler.
Yeah, and those first two names are two guys that I had written down as well. I mean, Becton's basically a walking refrigerator, and Denzel Mims, when he's on the field, he is very much a difference maker. I mean, we saw how important he was when Joe Flacco was playing, and we saw that when Darnold gets a little bit of protection, he's a good option for him. But I also wrote down Neville Hewitt. I think he's been, for a defense that struggled, he's been a good linebacker. He leads the team in tackles. He's pretty much been everywhere that other people haven't been. I mean, the Jets needed someone to step up without Jamal Adams, and again, not having Williamson there as well. But I think at least there's a couple guys I think the Jets can look at and sort of say, all right, we got something here, but we just got to sort of get the right everything else, like coaching, and even a kicker would be nice for them to get as well.
Right.
So let's move on.
I think the wide receiver core as a whole. I mean, I'm sorry.
No,
I was going to say,
there
hasn't been a ton of games where the top 3 guys have all been healthy. Crowder, Perryman, and Mims. I think either 1 or 2 games, or all 3 of them have been healthy. And that's a pretty solid wide receiving core. That if if a guy like Darnold is going to rebound, that's a group of guys he could do it with. Or if you bring in a new guy next year, I think that's a very a very good core to work with. Obviously, you got to fill the black hole that is the tight end position. Right. I mean, just absolutely nothing out of there this year. And running back, you got some young guys. Ty Johnson's looking not bad. Josh Adams looks not bad. P. Ryan, I don't know. I haven't really seen anything yet. Too. But you got opportunity. That's all. A guy like Frank Gore obviously isn't going to be there going forward.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So let's talk about that little quarterback situation, right? One of the things I felt about Sam Darnold's season is that, one, he's dealt with injuries, and he hasn't had that trio of good receivers. And when you don't have a quality tight end, that's going to hurt you as well. So are you in let's get Trevor Lawrence in here and ditch Sam Darnold? Are you in for a competition between the two, or do you want to trade the pick and stick with Mr. Darnold as the quarterback?
Personally, I don't want to see both these guys on the same roster next year.
Mhm.
That being said, Lawrence is the guaranteed number one overall pick, no matter who ends up getting it. Um, the Jets need to take him if he's there. I was hesitant to say that earlier in the season, where you didn't know how Darnold was. They, obviously, with the COVID shortened offseason, he wasn't working with a lot of the new guys he got brought in. You thought, okay, maybe he's going to piece it together. He obviously, Jets won on that run at the end of last year. He looked very promising, but he just has not put it together at all this year. Not only that, but he's really regressed in a lot of aspects and a lot of his decision making with the ball. He's throwing late balls across the middle. He's throwing into double, triple coverage sometimes. And I think he's a talented guy. You see the arm talent, you see the mobility, but I just think it's one of those situations where he needs a fresh start, be it a new city, be it a new coach, or both. And I would have loved to have seen him gotten moved at the trade deadline to a team maybe like New Orleans or Pittsburgh or Indy, these old aging quarterbacks that have good old lines. That I mean is the good coaching staff for that matter. That is just the complete opposite of what Darnold's had for his whole career. So even if he sits on the bench for the rest of the season for those teams, I think he'd be in a position to step in and do well for those guys in next year and the coming years. But you know, GMs aren't. There's not going to be a bidding war for Sam Darnold at this point. It's just whatever the Jets could get for him, whether that be at best if he strings together a few good games at the end of the season, maybe you get a second or a third out of him. But in all likelihood, it's probably going to be a 4 or a 5. But obviously that all depends on the Jets getting the number one pick.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things. I think when you think of Sam Darnold, I think of Travis Darno with the Mets, where he was never going to be as
Yes,
good as he is now with that
exactly.
current team. So I
Mhm.
think you have to move him. You get Gase out of there. You get a whole new group of people. Because I think also too, Darnold's working with. He's gonna have to work with a new offensive coordinator. We assume if Gase is gone,
Mhm.
and I think Lawrence just the potential there and the fact that you can sort of just rebuild in general. I think unfortunately you rebuild is kind of sounds crazy with a young already having a young quarterback, but I think there's so much damage that has already been done to him. You just got to
Absolutely.
trade him even though his stock is low.
Yeah, for his sake too. He knows. I think he wants to succeed here, but it's just was set up for failure from day one. Has not been given the help, and for both parties, it's best for him to leave.
Yeah. So let's move on to the New York Mets here. Of course, the rumor broke that the Rockies want the Mets to engage for Nolan Arenado. Of course, the Mets have a whole group of guys that they could trade for him. Should the Mets make this move, or why not would you want them to do it?
I think a lot of Mets fans see trading for Arenado or a guy like Lindor, another guy to play on the same side of the infield. A lot of them see it as a luxury. I think it's really a necessity because there's a lot of guys that I look at a JD Davis, I look at a Dom Smith. Obviously, they could swing it well, but and a Brandon Nimmo for that matter, they pretty good bats. We know you're gonna get them at the plates, but almost positionless in a lot of senses. I mean, Dom Smith is obviously a first baseman by trade, but with the DH still up in the air, you gotta have Pete in the lineup. You gotta keep him anchored at first. So I'd be pretty comfortable with putting a guy like Dom Smith in the corner outfield. Davis, third base is a pretty premier defensive position. I don't like the idea of having Davis there, and I guess you could throw him in the outfield if you don't have him or Smith. But ideally in a package for Lindor, Arenado, someone like that, I would love to throw in either. I want to keep Smith obviously because of what he did last year. Sorry, hold on, I gotta get the door. Oh yeah, absolutely great. And outfield defense has not been a strength for the Mets in a while. I mean, obviously the 2015 World Series comes to mind.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to. Nimmo, they've been trying to throw him out in center field from 4-2. These guys aren't natural center fielders. You got to get them on the corners. And a guy like Dom Smith, you got to throw him out in the corner as well. I know a topic we're going to probably get to later is what we do about center field. I think you could go out and get a guy that has a great glove out there. Doesn't have to have a great bat, but that would be a good plus to have on both sides. and really just get a star, an absolute stud on the infield. A guy like Arenado, a guy like Lindor. The Mets, they have the depth to make it happen, and I think they should.
Yeah, the one thing that scares me the most about Arenado is the fact that he's making 32.5 million. The fact that he's already 30. And to me, if you're going to make this trade, the Rockies have to take Robinson Cano in return. I think the Mets can give money like the Mariners did. They gave $20 million to the Mets to take Cano. And I think they should at least put Cano in the trade as well, because you can't have those two heavy contracts. And also Jacob deGrom, he's still good, but that's another heavy contract. So you don't want to load yourself with too many of those and then hurt yourself from working under the luxury tax. Then you have to end up working over it, which is Steve Cohen may have a lot of money, but he doesn't want to waste it.
Right. That's
Right,
what I mean. This is obviously not a move that we would even consider the past regime making, but
right.
I think I'm thinking like Steve Cohen from what I've seen of him so far. He seems very ambitious. He seems very eager to get the best team possible on the field. So maybe he'd be willing to take on Arenado's contract and try to make Cano's contract work at the same time, because I can't see a team's not going to be eager to take that contract. But I would like to see him get it done. And also, I hear some people chirping about the Coors Field effect. Arenado's got to be the best guy to come out of Coors Field and in a while. And even if the bat is diminished a little bit, I mean, that glove could play anywhere. And
Yeah.
Mets have not had anything like that since right in his prime.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So let's move on to another big Mets question here. And it transitioned, so we're going to talk about a little bit about George Springer. So George Springer or Trevor Bauer, which is your number one priority as this offseason continues?
I think, both guys would be great. Both guys have got to be at the top of the list. But if you're asking me, tell me I can only have one. I want a guy like Springer who, Bauer coming off the Cy Young, be at the top of the rotation, give you a solid outing every 5 days. But, Springer's a guy you can throw out there, every game, or, 150 games out of a 162 game season. He contributes to every day. Great glove, great bat. You think of a guy like Carlos Beltran, also coming from Houston, very similar player. He fills a lot of needs, especially the glove in center field, which, again, they haven't had a real center fielder since, I guess, Lagares, if you think about it like that, and his bat only really been active for about a year or so. You get a star like that in center field that helps you on both sides, and that's an absolute game changer for the Mets.
Yeah, no doubt. And my thing with Trevor Bauer is going into the 2020 season, him and Jake Odorizzi were not too far off in terms of the type of pitcher they were. Both had very similar career numbers. Bauer's maybe a little more of a strikeout pitcher, but if you can get Odorizzi, you get Tanaka to combine those two together, and then you get Springer too. I think the analytics department's got to look at that and say that is way more valuable to sign 3 players for that same amount of money who are good than to just sign 2. And then you kind of lock yourself in a little bit.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned the fact that Bauer's a strikeout pitcher. The Mets, you think of the Mets, you think of a guy like DeGrom, Syndergaard, the power arms, got like strikeout type stuff. But, Citi Field, you think of the dimensions. You don't need guys with strikeout stuff. You could get a lot of lazy fly balls that, in some other little parts might get out of there. You can go to Philadelphia, Camden Yards, Yankee Stadium. Those balls will be getting out. But for the Mets, when they built this ballpark, they knew that the pitching was coming up, and they wanted to make a ballpark that suited them well for that. And you don't have to pay top dollar for strikeout pitching when you could get a guy like Odorizzi, who doesn't have as same sort of wipeout stuff, but he could get outs in a ballpark like that.
Yeah, no doubt. It's about the Mets wanting to be smart. And we have just about 2 minutes left here. A little bit of a fun question here. You've been playing Madden forever, as long as you could hold a video game controller in your hand. Who is your favorite or maybe most overpowered Madden player in your lifetime of playing Madden?
My favorite, I love Bo Jackson running back card that they make in Madden every year. Sometimes it's a golden ticket, sometimes it's like a Christmas card. But they look at Bo Jackson's career and they make a card. They ask themselves, what did this guy played like his whole career? How big he was, how strong he was, how fast he was, how elusive he was, and they make him an absolute just beast running back, catching the ball, running the ball. You can't bring him down. You can't catch him. And my play style, man, is very run heavy. So I mean, I get to give it to him 15, 20 times a game, and guys are just bouncing off him. It's very fun for me, not very fun for the other guy.
Yeah, for me, I think of two guys automatically. My bigger Madden days were back when the PS2, PS3 Madden games were coming out. But Mike Vick in
Right.
like the mid 2000s is
Oh yeah.
automatically a beast. And it was at a point in that game where accuracy didn't really matter. As long as you could throw the ball deep, it really
Oh
made a
yeah.
huge difference. And then this one's a little bit of a crazier one, but I think about Sebastian Janikowski because if you had the wind in your direction, at least if it was
Yeah.
5 miles an hour or more, you could hit 60 plus yarders with ease with
Yeah.
that guy. So we got enough time for one more. We got just about 30 seconds left. So let's
All
go
right.
with the question that I think a lot of NFL fans are wondering about too. Are the Jets going to win a game at some point this year?
I believe full-heartedly that the Jets are going to win a game at some point during the season. I think it's going to be Week 17, whether that be, the Jets always the propensity to win meaningless games at the end of the year,
Right.
piled with Belichick's desire to not have to play Trevor Lawrence, twice a year for the next 10, 15 years. I mean, it's a perfect recipe for disaster. I think Belichick's going to pull Newton. He's going to play Stidham, and he'll be able to make the excuse that Cam's not going to be here next year. It's not going to come off as an obvious tank job
Right.
on their part. And the Jets are going to win that game. And, the Jaguars have Minshew back at quarterback now. Obviously helps them a lot. Maybe they squeak out a win one of these next 3 weeks, but if not, it's looking very bad for the Jets. And if they're not able to keep Lawrence, I'd be more inclined to keep Darnold, although Fields is a nice consolation.
Yeah, I think the Jets can actually pull this thing off. I think they can do the magical 0-16 season. I thought it was going to be a little harder
Right.
without having Greg Williams as the defensive coordinator. But as long as Adam Gase
Right.
is still in charge, and after watching those Seahawks just demolish them over that was just a terrible game. I mean, that game was over by the time they landed in Seattle. But I just don't think there's any way for them to squeak out a victory because they didn't even have any type of momentum offensively. And you think when the game is a blowout like that, you think maybe you get like a BS touchdown, you make it like a 42-10 game or 42-17, but there was never any momentum from them.
I don't know about you, but it's a pretty pitiful moment for me. Thinking when the Jets played the Raiders 2 weeks ago, I think in the past 5 years since the Mets were in the World Series, that is the happiest, most excited I've been in any moment regarding one of my sports teams. And obviously it was celebrating them losing on a heartbreaking Hail Mary touchdown, and I was elated.
Yeah, if the Jets do end up getting Trevor Lawrence, you think someone's got to send Greg Williams a nice gift in the mail for that play call.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
All right, so that is the 15 minutes is up now. You get 15 seconds. Say anything you want. Let me bring that up right now. 15 seconds. Say anything you want. Plug anything you want. Any hot take you want to make, whatever it is.
Okay,
15
I got
seconds.
plenty of those.
Oh, or you definitely do. 15 seconds and go for it.
All right, see the Christmas tree behind me. Obviously, it's Christmas season. Elf. Elf is a terrible Christmas movie. It's not funny. Will Ferrell, the acting, I don't know. It's just so exaggerated, so over the top, not funny. Stupidity is not humorous. It's not funny for anyone who's not a child. Stop watching Elf.
All right, and I absolutely love that take and that's why I didn't even cut you off. Once I heard something about Elf, I was like, you know what? Let's see where this goes. I feel that way. Alexis feels that way about Elf.
Thank God.
Not a movie that we recommend watching. I think Die Hard's the way I go when you talk about Christmas movies.
You either go Die Hard or you go Rudolph or The Grinch. Okay, go with the classics.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, so that is it for this week's edition of UpFront Takes. Of course, Debo won't be back next week, but I'd like to have a nice little rotation. So Debo will be back 1 week. We have Schweitz maybe coming back another week. Debo, thank you for joining us, and we will speak to you all next week.